Well, that escalated quickly. I mean, in just 24 hours, we went from President Trump actually saying some nice things about Ukraine to his potentially being read in on a coming offensive. Okay, so we'll dig into what we know so far. Now, if you find value in these videos, the best way to support the channel is on Patreon. And to all existing patrons, thank you all so much for your continued support. That link will be in the description below. Now, the Wall Street Journal just a couple hours ago released this article titled, quote, "How Zelensky's Charm Offensive Reversed Trump's Skepticism on Ukraine." They say Trump has spent recent days with U.S. officials who have long pushed for a stronger stance towards Ukraine as he prepared for the meeting with Zelensky, including Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg and new ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz. They updated Trump on current battlefield conditions, noting that Russia has made little progress in recent years. Trump was also made aware of a planned Ukrainian offensive, which would require U.S. intelligence support. So I feel like we got to take this one head on. It would be significant if Ukraine carried out some sort of offensive operation right now. It's not obviously clear exactly where that would be or what the desired end state would be. This is one report, but I think it's worth keeping this in mind, especially given the relatively rapid change of tone, not just from President Trump. We're going to play videos later today. We've got it from Ambassador Waltz. Secretary Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, is chiming in on why Russia bad all of a sudden. It just... Take all of that together, and the idea that Ukraine might be putting something together in the background actually does make a little bit of sense. Now, in terms of what some sort of new offensive here could look like, it's not obviously clear, which is a good thing for Ukraine in this sense. My gut would say that it would be some sort of long-range missile attack, maybe massing drones. We've seen Ukraine recently roll out the Flamingo long-range missiles. Massive warhead they have on those things, and we believe that one or two of those may have been tested in Crimea, leaving just a huge crater where an old KGB facility, where it was a KGB facility until the Flamingo hit it, and now it's just a hole in the ground. It sounds like Ukraine has a number of those. Maybe we see those employed against a variety of targets and or massing drone attacks. If we are going to consider some sort of ground offensive, which is not completely out of the realm of possibility, we should at least consider it a little bit. But we have to mention that Ukraine has a disadvantage when it comes to manpower and equipment, and we just have not seen large-scale ground offensives result in very much success on either side in quite a while now. Nonetheless, worth getting into. My gut would say probably not some sort of push into Bryansk, Kursk, or Belgorod. I don't know that there's a lot of strategic gain in Ukraine doing something like that. I would say probably down here in Donetsk. This is the area, if you look at recent conversations about ceding territory and Ukraine giving up some land for Russia, maybe leaving other areas, this is what Putin wants more than anything, is the rest of Donetsk. So, yes, there are other areas here a little further south that Ukraine could push and try to recapture some territory, but this is kind of center stage. And not just Donetsk, but right around Pokrovsk as well. This is an area that has been the center of Russian offensive operations for more than a year now, and they have not succeeded in taking Pokrovsk. The fighting here is significant. Day in and day out, the vast majority of highly kinetic operations and casualties are coming from this sector of the front each day. So if Ukraine were to carry out some sort of offensive ground operation to try to retake territory that would cause an outsized effect to the Russian war effort, it might be right here, right? Pushing them back further out of Pokrovsk, maybe severing this line here and making this area that Russia feels like they're making progress, slowly but surely, make it even that much less tenable. And then how can Russia argue that Ukraine should give this up in some sort of negotiations if Russia is actively being pushed out of Donetsk itself? Again, I don't know if pipe dream is the right way to say it. It's very hard to look at the battlefield right now and say, yeah, of course, that's where some sort of offensive operation would play out. But again, keep that back of mind as we look at a couple clips here. And just think of what changed so quickly, because this is a drastic shift in Trump's tone. I want to start out with a couple clips here from Ukrainian President Zelensky yesterday, actually, going on Fox News, where he was asked, why do you think the relationship changed so quickly? And he says, Putin kept lying, which probably helped Zelensky's cause. Here we go.
Your relationship with President Trump seems to have improved. Is that fair to say?
I think we have better relation than before, And I think we didn't have a close relation because we didn't have maybe time. I don't know other reasons. It's good that we have often phone calls and meetings. And I think the fact that Putin was lying to President Trump so many times also made a difference between us.
Now, in this case, Zelensky is kind of pushing it off like it just, it happened because we kept talking and Putin was lying, it turns out. And we've heard that from Trump and the White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, just earlier today, where she said, Putin kept saying one thing and then he'd fire missiles and drones into Ukraine overnight. And eventually the president got tired and realized he's not being honest. That's a part of it, no doubt. But it's worth mentioning that Zelensky is a very skilled politician, especially in his... Look, I don't know all the ins and outs of the domestic political landscape, not by a long shot, but if you just look at how he is handling his relationship with Trump, it's very smart. And if you look back to the time period where kind of towards the end of the election cycle or the campaign cycle, when it wasn't entirely clear if Trump or Biden was going to win, you would see Zelensky issue statements and talk with kind of both sides and present things in a different manner. And then the minute that Trump came into office, Zelensky shifted over to more of an economic benefit partnership for the United States. Whereas with Biden, it was much more fighting for democracy and standing up for our neighbors. So Zelensky knows what he's doing in this sense, and I think this is kind of bearing fruit at this point. Now, he was also asked about the kind of a reaction to President Trump saying, hey, Ukraine can win this war if they have appropriate support from the European Union and NATO. Here's what he had to say about that.
Are you surprised to hear that?
A little bit. A little bit. I mean, this, I'm sure in my people, in my army, and I'm sure in strengthening of in support of the United States. But President Trump was more positive in it, and he showed that he wants to support Ukraine to the very end. So we understand now that we are ready to finish this war as quick as possible. And he wants, and I want, and our people want. But he understands that Putin doesn't want, and he understands that he is not winning, but he says to everybody that he will win. And I see very, it was a little bit surprise for me, you're right. I was very positive signals from the side that Trump and America will be with us to the end of the war. Yes, as we will see.
Yeah.
Right? We will see, but God bless, it will be so.
So he brings up a really good point here that I think might not be so obvious to people that aren't paying a lot of attention to the conflict. But when you're talking about people actually interested in wanting to bring about an end to the war, if you dig in just a little bit, you'll find that there's one party here that actually is not incentivized to end the war today, and that's Russia. And I wonder how much of this is kind of permeating through Trump's advisors and just getting hit over the head again and again and again. Because when you look at how things have played out, it's not just actions, but also incentives here. So, we'll hear Vice President Vance here in a minute talk about how this war stopping would be good for the United States. It certainly would be good for Ukraine. And you hear President Zelensky over and over and over and over again trying to do what he can to bring about an end to the war. He's agreed to countless different demands. Russia has not. Russia has constantly moved the goalpost, and Russia is the only one of the two combatants, but one of the three main parties here, where it wouldn't actually be good for their leadership or maybe even their country if the war stopped. We've talked about this in recent videos, but Russia has shifted over to this wartime economy. They've stood up factories in rural areas of their country that were just falling apart, and there were no jobs there. Jobs were leaving, and they've gone back in and rebuilt those factories and brought in drone manufacturing, tank refurbishment, manufacturing ammunition, fiber optic cables, bandages, whatever it might be. The war has provided a level of income to so many people around Russia that they never could have imagined and have never experienced before in their life. When the war stops, that goes away. It's a tough spot Putin has put himself in. Then you've got the soldiers' salaries. Wars are generally fought with lower income demographics. That's just how it happens, and they're taking advantage of that in Russia, no doubt. They are pulling people from all over the country and paying them wages that are unheard of in their area of Russia. The death benefits are allowing their families to live lives that they, again, never could have imagined. When the war goes away, that goes away. and you've got this flood of, I don't know, million plus, I'm not sure the exact size of the Russian military at this point, flowing back into the country, needing jobs, but those jobs are going away. They're disenfranchised. If the war stops without a clear victory, they're not happy. Like, it is in Putin's best interest right now to just kind of keep this going. So I agree with President Zelensky that, kind of pointing out, maybe more and more people recognizing that Putin does not actually want this war to end. And that's something that Vice President Vance hit on as well. And I'm going to play a couple other clips here because I think it's important to recognize we're seeing a shift in the messaging, not just from President Trump. And this is one of the things with President Trump is he will just say things. Sometimes you're not clear. Like, wait, did he say that on purpose? Is he going off script? Is this part of the messaging? And you generally have to give it a little bit of time to see whether or not that was planned yesterday. I'm getting the impression now it was. But we're starting to see more and more people, important people, get on board with that messaging and say, hey, this is accurate. This is the way it's going to be. In this case, Russia bad. We're going to do what we can to bring about an end to the war. Here's Vice President Vance just a few hours ago talking about how Russia needs to negotiate. And notice he calls out Russia, doesn't call out Ukraine. Russia needs to negotiate or it's going to be bad for their country. Here we go.
The president has grown very confident that this war is bad for Russia. You hear me say this all the time. You hear the president say this all the time. The war is bad for Russia. It's bad for Ukraine. It's bad for America. We want the killing to stop. That remains the president's position. But the president also can look at reality on the ground. He sees the economic numbers that are coming out of Eastern Europe. He sees the number of dead people, both Russians and Ukrainians, that are happening in that war. And the president is telling Vladimir Putin it is time to stop the killing. He would say that to Zelensky. In fact, has said that to Zelensky. He wants this war to end, and he's doing everything that he can to stop it. But look, if the Russians refuse to negotiate in good faith, I think it's going to be very, very bad for their country. That's what the president made clear. It's not a shift in position. It's an acknowledgement of the reality on the ground. We're going to keep on fighting for peace every single day in the Trump administration.
Look, it's finally happening. We're finally starting to see senior U.S. officials issue threats towards Russia. And, credit to Poland a couple days ago that on the floor of the United Nations Security Council said, Russia, no more. You fly another jet into our airspace. Don't come crying when we shoot. Actually, you know what? Let's play that clip. The foreign minister of Poland, Sikorsky, right here, following up on 3 Russian jets flying into Estonian airspace. This was the threat from Poland that I think was incredibly appropriate. Here we go.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned. Thank you.
So we've got that. We've got Vice President Vance in that statement just a second ago calling out Russia. It's not both. He's saying if Russia does not negotiate in good faith, it's going to be bad for Russia. Good. That's where we need to be. These two are not coming at Ukraine and Russia are not approaching this situation the same way, not by a long shot. And it makes me happy. I think this is the right position that we are finally coming around to that. And even if it's just words right now, let's hope there's some action that follows it up. But it's the right words. We're seeing that shift in the U.S. policy. Hopefully we follow through. Now, in terms of the continued threats or these new threats against Russia that we really haven't seen before, Ambassador Mike Waltz, former U.S. National Security Advisor, was recently appointed to be the UN ambassador for the United Nations, was asked on Fox News about this. Is it appropriate for NATO to be shooting down Russian aircraft? This was his response.
Common sense coming from the president. We talked about this in my first Security Council meeting, which was just Monday that the Estonians called. And between the violations of Romanian airspace, Polish airspace, and now Estonian airspace, I think Putin, the Russians, should take the message from the president. He's not messing around. He's incredibly serious. The Iranians learned painfully that he will use sticks as well as carrots.
So again, this is something we've hammered on this channel day after day for a while now, but you don't have to shoot down a Russian jet or kill a Russian fighter pilot, anything like that. If nothing else, we just need to make it clear to Russia and to Putin that we stand with the NATO alliance. That's another aspect of that. When our UN ambassador is saying, yeah, it's common sense. Like NATO will intercept those aircraft, and if need be, they will shoot them down. Good. hope that message is received. And it sounds like Waltz mentioned that conversation has been had and reiterated to his counterparts, his Russian counterparts at the United Nations. But to give you an idea of how much this new messaging has permeated, we have the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, talking about this. Now, there's a piece here that does apply to him when it comes to sanctions and tariffs. So, like, it's not completely out of left field. This isn't quite, there's some certain cabinet members where maybe this would be even more surprising, but this one's odd. You don't usually have the Treasury Secretary commenting in this level of detail about ongoing foreign affairs. Let's give that a listen.
But now Putin has started making incursions, into the NATO borders.
Exactly.
So the one thing I can tell you is the U.S. is not going to get involved with troops or any of that. We will sell the Europeans weapons, and then the Europeans can pass them on to Ukraine. President Trump wants this war to end. He's said several times yesterday he thought it would be the easiest one to end. President Putin has made it clear that he just keeps escalating, and it's a race between the Ukraine military, the Russian economy, and we want our European allies to step up and focus on the sources of the revenues for the Russian economy,
right.
And it's oil. And Maria, just to be clear, this goes back to the original sin from President Trump's first term, where he told them, do not create Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
And it was that reliance on Russian energy that got us here.
Well, look, we had President.
Look, I'm here for it. I wish it hadn't taken this long. I love seeing the kind of U-turn or the 180 that we're seeing from so many people in the administration. I do want to caution or stress caution here again, because it's actions that actually matter. We'll see those actions actually play through or actually carry out. But again, so important to see the messaging shift in this regard. We were going to get nowhere. Nothing was going to change at all if we continued this asking Russia nicely, asking Ukraine nicely. Russia ignores us. Ukraine does what we say, and then we're right back in the same spot 2 to 3 weeks later. It is a waste of everybody's time. We're accomplishing nothing. And I don't think it's a surprise that one of the things we have not done is pressure Russia. And whether that's sanctions, whether that's increasing arms supplies to Ukraine, increasing intelligence, whatever it might be, or maybe promising a NATO membership, right? Or a security guarantee afterwards, or standing up, assisting with the coalition of the willing, a no-fly zone just over the Ukrainian border in NATO territories. There's so many things we could do to pressure Russia that we have not done. So even though this is just talk, even though this is just language right now, and of course, words don't end wars, actions end wars, it's a step in the right direction, and it's been a positive step here over the last couple days. But that's all we got for now. Again, if any value is found in these videos, you can consider becoming a patron at the link in the description below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.